Alrighty, today I'm at Harmony Gardens in Golden, Colorado, and today gardener Dave and I are going to be creating a video on the foundation of what is Harmony Gardens, and that is the soil. And the way that Dave cultivates that is through his technique of creating compost, which really creates a strong foundation and is ultimately the backbone for creating nutritious and vital vegetables, which also taste great. So today we are going to go over a little bit of his layering process and the interesting and fascinating facts behind the intuitive science that is creating compost. So yeah.
Harmony Garden is 20 years old now, but when we started we didn't have any soil at all. And we've actually had compost and leaves and manure and various things that we've added build the soil to a depth of probably about 8 inches or a foot of soil that we've built. And composting is the centerpiece. Our strategy for building good compost is to layer the ingredients to make these living or once living materials the kind of food that the microbes, the viruses, the fungi are going to be wanting to eat. And we also want to keep the maintenance to a minimum. A lot of people will turn a pile very vigorously, and that's a lot of work. We'd rather layer it up. And we'd rather put layers of carbon and finished compost, which is essentially the seed material, and the scraps themselves and the garden waste itself. Put layers that will have oxygen in the layer. We also don't want to invite unwanted guests. A lot of times we have to resort to this. So far I still have all my fingers. So our strategy is threefold. We want an operational pile that can really perform very quickly and provide good rich compost. We usually start out our layering process by adding some of the very microbes to the pile that have already done the job in the previous pile. And in a shovel full of soil like this, believe it or not, there are more organisms than there are people on Earth. This is a very rich and very, I would say, very miraculous process. And we start out by adding a layer of this. These are some of the odd things we find in a pile. Obviously you didn't mean to compost this, but it can get in there. We give this nice rich layer, and then we're going to feed it something for its own energy use, which is carbonaceous material. This is dried grass, or you could call it straw. And that will be also a layer of oxygen. That'll keep the oxygen in the pile that the microbes need. So essentially what we're doing is we're trying to give the microbes everything that they need. We're trying to give them the seed material, the microbes population. We're giving them the energy food. We're giving them the water that they need. We're giving them the air that they need. And then we'll add the scraps and vegetable waste themselves. When we put in our scraps, and sometimes this is garden waste or whatever was once living or is still alive, we like to chop it up in nice bite-sized pieces for them. What we're trying to do here with this layer is keep it insulated. We don't want the smell to be attracting the rodents, and squirrels come in too. So we're going to try and put this in a layer that can then be covered up by either soil or finished compost, because otherwise they'll come in and they'll start to burrow into this, and we want to prevent as much of that as possible. But this is going to turn into this within about, in the summertime, within about 3 weeks. And so it takes a little work to do it, but if you're managing your pile well with some of these steps and others you'll find online, it's just the way nature does it. And we can speed up that process by giving the microbes everything that they need. People ask quite often what doesn't go into the pile. And I think most people would understand that plastic shouldn't go in the pile. Microbes can't break that down. Very hard roots and so forth, or they can't get to that. We always want to make sure that we chop up whatever is going to be a big bunch of stuff. You don't want to put wood in either. You don't want to put animal products in. And the reason for that is you're going to attract rodents if you have the smell of cheese or meat. And plus the microbes that are routinely in a pile like this aren't expert at breaking down those high proteinaceous materials anyway. So keep the animal products out. And I think what really bugs me the most is finding mysterious things in here that have been in here in some cases for, you know, a year or something if this pile is an old pile. Sure, it's inconvenient to take off things like this, but that we would prefer having materials in here that are readily decomposable and that can turn it into that expert compost that we're used to having. So at this point, what we would do is we would layer some more carbon and oxygen over the top of the pile. And then what we can do after that is put another layer of soil over. I happen to have some the soil that was on the roots of some clumps of grass, and I'll put that over the top. The idea there is to seal in the odors and make sure that the rodents don't you know, smell that and start causing trouble. By the time the pile is finished, you begin to see the roll-up bugs and the worms and so forth. That means that the pile isn't hot anymore and that the soil is ready to be used. Composting is a process, but it's a very satisfying one. It's, in a way, it's almost like winemaking or any other craft. You are optimizing the system so that it can work with you and make very nutritious food and a very beautiful looking garden. And this is not the only technique. There are other things that are easily found on the web, and try your own technique. But once you get the technique, it's really pretty easy. And I like to think in terms of how gardening well is my way of being a good citizen, because really the food system is one of the largest impacts on things like climate change. And if we can learn how to do urban gardening well, we're going to be able to really take a big bite out of the greenhouse gases. So happy composting.